We are here for the fifth installment of a video where I have been reacting to a video that Tucker Carlson did called Calley and Casey Means How Big Pharma Keeps You Sick and the Dark Truth About Ozempic and the Pill. I think this video is so amazing that there's no one title that could capture it all. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to break it up into several videos as I go through the commentary. I'm going to give you about a 1-minute recap of what we've covered in the first 4 videos, and then we're going to jump right into this one. Thanks for being here. I've been on a carnivore diet now known as the Lion Diet for the past 3.5 years. One of my viewers told me that I have to watch this interview because it's mind-blowing.
You are a Stanford-educated physician.
Patients in America are getting much sicker.
When any American gets sick with a chronic condition, they go on a lifetime medication and they keep racking up more comorbidities. But you don't die, you just suffer.
What is the highest value intervention you can do for a patient? Get them to eat healthy. Doesn't cost a lot, has incredible outcomes universally.
Our child's environment is to an unprecedented degree full of hormone-disrupting chemicals.
The average girl in America is hitting puberty, which is sexual maturity, 6 years earlier than they were in 1900.
We're spending on Medicaid more on preventable metabolic chronic conditions than the defense budget. That's all rigged by pharma as a piggy bank. The medical leadership should just say the truth. They should explain why there's an obesity crisis among children. It's not a Ozempic deficiency.
Can we just go to the pill really quick? And I just want to say up front that I'm Protestant. I've never had a problem with birth control, never thought about it at all. So that's my position, or has been my position, which is actually radically changing as we speak. But I've always felt that way. So I never really thought about it. But I always noticed that you were not allowed to criticize the pill, period. Like that was not allowed in the world I grew up in. You could have all kinds of kooky opinions. You cannot criticize the birth control pill. And now I feel like maybe we were played a little bit. Why you're laughing sardonically?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak as a physician, but I can also just speak as a woman who has taken all these different medications because it's liberation.
Yeah.
It's liberation.
Yes.
We can do whatever we want, and who needs to get a period when you can, work in the hospital 100 hours a week and put off having, and then I freeze my eggs at 37 and have kids, So as a woman, I mean, I do think, of course, these drugs have helped in some ways, but we are prescribing them like candy. We're prescribing them for acne. We're prescribing them for PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, the leading cause of infertility in the United States, which is a metabolic issue driven by our food and how the food interacts with genetics. And then, of course, for birth control. So you've got these medications that are literally shutting down the hormones in the female body that create this cyclical life-giving nature of women. We basically told women these hormones don't matter. Your ability to create the most miracle of any miracles, which is create life, just shut it down. There's no impacts. That's crazy to me. And as I've woken up from this, I'm realized like your cycle and having these hormonal cycles is part and parcel with our health in every possible way, and also with the miracle of creating life. And so for years, you just lose the biofeedback of what's happening with your cycle. It is one of the key barometers of female health. How is your cycle doing? Is it regular? Is it heavy? And we just shut it down and say there's no repercussions for that, which I think gets to a larger issue, which is a disrespect of life, right?
Yes.
It's a disrespect of things that create life. And I think about, you've got the pill and it just goes hand in hand with the rise. And this is going to seem a little far out there, but like it goes rise and rhyme with the hand of industrial agriculture, the spraying of these pesticides, the things that give life in this world, which are women and soil. We have tried to dominate and shut down the cycles. We have lost respect for life, which again gets to the spiritual crisis.
Keep going. I love this.
And I think
you are speaking truth right now.
For the sake of efficiency, right? For this delusion of short-term gains, for yields, for profit. But what we need to realize is that we live in an interdependent ecosystem that has to be harmonious, not dominated, which means gentler, And so by taking a hammer to women's hormones, taking a hammer to pests, what we've done is we are destroying the things that give us life in this country. And that is, I think, part of the root cause of why things feel so dark right now, because it's bigger than all of this. We are actually turning our back on life.
Does it surprise you that all of this happened within 20 years of developing the atom bomb?
No. And I mean, speaking of that,
Before we get too far down that rabbit trail, because I already know where that's going. My wife is very interested in all of this history that she's talking about right here, about how we got to where we are when it regards the pill and abortion and all the other things that she grew up basically, like all of us when we're children, very confused about things in the world, not understanding exactly what's going on, looking to adults for answers, and remembering how she had talked to doctors and had been told that she needs to be taking this pill for things like acne and other issues that had nothing to do with preventing having a child. And then also the confusion she got with regard to abortion. It's like we're at such a much more insane level of what we're telling our children today, that if that was confusing, what is it like for the children today who are being given the option to think that they're in the wrong body and that maybe they need to start cutting their body parts off so that they can change things? I mean, it's really scary when I think about having kids growing up this day and age with so much confusion that they don't even know what gender they are. It's scary. I mean, it's sad because that is attacking them at such a deep level that they don't even really grasp what's happening when they're being told these things and how confusing that can be. I mean, life is confusing enough on its own without the added confusion of all this ideology being spread. And ultimately, these ideologies are being used for profit. These ideologies are being used to make these surgeons tons of money on doing things they shouldn't be doing. I won't even get into the whole Planned Parenthood scandal, but if you've been paying attention, you realize what a big deal that is. I mean, people talking about getting Lamborghinis because they're selling body parts. It's almost unbelievable were it not for the fact that these people have been caught on camera saying the things that they were saying. And it's refreshing to hear a woman who grew up hearing all this stuff and accepting it. As my wife says, that she accepted a lot of this empowerment, but the empowerment wasn't empowering for them. It was empowering for somebody else. Them realizing that they had been lied to be used as pawns in a bigger game is really exciting to see, because it's something that I haven't seen in a lot of my life. Because we were taught, especially growing up in the 80s and 90s, all the TV shows kept telling us how we can't question these things. We have to just accept them. We just have to keep moving in this direction, even though it's moved us away from taking care of our own children the proper way, raising our own children, to putting our children more completely in the hands of the state to do all of the raising. And then we wonder why we've lost a generation or two when it comes to people having their heads on straight. So I like what she's had to say here. I hope it's empowering to women who want to be mothers, that want to raise children, that want to have this natural part of their life not stolen from them. If you want to work, that's fine. If you want to have a career, that's fine. If you want to get your education and do all these wonderful things, that's fine. But don't let the lies of how not important these things are about motherhood and raising children stop you from enjoying some of the best parts about life that God intended for all men and women. Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.
I think it's really interesting to think about the relationship between war and what's happening.
100%.
So where did all these pesticides that have destroyed our life-giving soil and are creating a fragile food system, which is going to create a food crisis at some point, where did they all come from? Nazi Germany, right? So Hitler was developing chemicals of war and trying to create agriculture solutions to create more food yields for Germany. And some of these pesticides, these organophosphate chemicals, were turned directly into sprays that we're putting on all our food. The interrelationship between Nazi Germany and what's being sprayed on every piece of food in the United States is deeply linked, and we need to think about that.
Right.
15% of...
And one other thing I just want to say, this is being federally subsidized by the government through the farm bills. We haven't spoken about the farm bills, but you think about this funneling of money that's happening and how the government in a way is working against us. And I don't think it's nefarious at all. I think people just don't understand. We've talked to so many Congress people. They just don't understand the health effects of all these things that are happening, of the processed foods. And everyone likes their Oreos. So it's a tough issue because we're addicted. But the farm bills are making all these unhealthy foods cheaper. They federally subsidize commodity crops, which are turned into processed food. So this is the corn, the soy, the wheat, making these foods artificially cheaper. So this is why, people say, this is where the social justice piece comes into it. It is, in many ways, it is much harder as a poor American to buy food that is not poisoned because our government is making the poisoned food cheaper.
And that's why the free market has nothing to do with all this stuff that's going on. I hear people make that argument all the time. Well, we live in a free market, and that's why this is happening. It's because of capitalism that this is happening. This has nothing to do with capitalism. As I said in previous videos, this is all about cronyism. This is about people repaying favors for favors that were given to those who are in elected positions now. This is all about getting your good old boy system going where you help those who help you. It's about scratching somebody's back. It has nothing to do with health or anything like that. What's interesting to me is I read a book not too long ago called Ravenous, Otto Warburg, the Nazis, and the Search for the Cancer Diet Connection by Sam Apple. It was a very interesting look at cancer and sugar and why we got off track with regard to figuring out the causes for cancer. By the way, sugar plays a huge role in that. Genetics obviously play a role as well. Genetics seem to play a role in everything, so let's just not discount genetics. But what we put in is the thing that we can control a lot more, and it turns out it's sugar. The bottom line is, though, is that when you're reading that book, the bottom line with regard to this video, though, is that when you read that book, you find out that Hitler and a lot of his men were vegetarians, and they thought that that was the key to beating cancer. So they were very big on producing this heavy agricultural system, killing off all the small animals and pests and everything else, and using their technology, their chemical technology to fight these things so that they could be healthier. And somehow through the passage of time, this is translated to being the kinder, gentler way of eating and recommending things. It's the ideology of veganism that if you're killing animals, you're the bad guy. If you're a carnivore, you're the bad guy. When you start to really look at the history of this stuff, you realize how backwards everything is. So just very interesting point there about what she's brought up with regard to how the chemicals brought about by World War II have a tremendous amount to do with our nutrition today.
It's happening. We don't even...
It's not a free market.
It's not a free market at work. This is not a free market. It's rigged. It's rigged against poor people. So there's nothing conservative about what's happening.
And totally President Trump is calling this out.
Yes.
RFK is obviously calling this out. But calling out a rigged market is not an attack on the free market. Like, we need to speak truth here, particularly when it's impacting human capital.
Well, calling out a rigged market is a call for a free market.
It's imperative.
That's right.
And working for these companies, we actually used to use that argument. You rig the market and then yell nanny state whenever anyone questions the rigged market. And the fact that there's more agriculture subsidies that go to tobacco than fruits and vegetables. 0.4% of agriculture subsidies go to fruits and vegetables. 2% goes to tobacco, 90% goes to ultra-processed food, and it's highly slanted against small farmers. This gets dark. I mean, talking about the Nazis, 15% of...
Well, I mean, it's just, I do think it's not accidental that was a regime based on occult practices that hated Christianity and whose signature act, which no one ever seems to remember, it was murdering hundreds of thousands of Germans in hospitals through euthanasia, so-called mercy killing of kids and adults who were substandard.
Yes.
And so, does it surprise you that atomic weapons and poison pesticides both came from that regime? No, not really.
Well, also,
sorry, that's just all true.
All right, I'm taking a look at some ingredients of a very popular soap that people use. Key ingredients: lauric acid, glycerin, and titanium dioxide. Sounds really healthy. There's a number of other ingredients in this soap. One of them is sodium tallowate, which is really about the only thing you need to actually have soap. So why all this other stuff? I don't even want to ask why. I just want to get back to using regular soap. Sodium tallowate is tallow mixed with some kind of alkaline substance to make soap. Soap basically just makes the particles on your skin more soluble so that they can come off easier. Another way I've heard it put that I like is it makes water wetter. And that's all it needs to do to effectively do its job. And that's what I like about Vintage Tradition Tallow Balm Soap, is it only uses tallow made from suet and extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is that alkaline substance that gives that tallow its soapy appeal. And it does exactly what I'm looking for it to do and nothing extra. Balm is the name of this amazing bar of soap because it actually soothes and nourishes your skin instead of drying it out like other soaps that strip the skin of beneficial oils. It's pure, simple ingredients instead of toxic chemicals make it super hypoallergenic. This large, dense bar will last a long time, making it a great value, and its soft, silky lather is just an added bonus. Get yours at vintagetradition.com and use my discount code Dante, D-A-N-T-E, when you order to save 10%.
Today, 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall. Adderall was created by Nazi Germany. So there's a great book called Blitzed about this, but Merck developed the precursor to Adderall in order to give the German soldiers. So they got one pill a day. And actually, it was discontinued by the end of the war because there was such psychosis among the German soldiers taking this every day. It was to make them more aggressive. They actually reformulated it, Merck, and made a stronger version. And that is Adderall, which is now given to 15% of children. This idea that, many parents watching, just as Ozempic's being pushed on their kids, just as SSRI is being pushed on their kids, just as SANs are being pushed on their kids, parents being cudgeled with medical studies saying they're putting their kid at risk for not following this medical guidance. They're also, if their kid is a little bit distracted, sitting in a sedentary environment with limited sunlight, being force-fed ultra-processed food, they're getting a little fidgety and they're prescribed Adderall right away.
And I can tell you from somebody who, when I was growing up, they had me on Ritalin because I was hyperactive and I had a hard time paying attention in class. I was a talker, always going. I mean, my motor was full speed all the time. And that was what they convinced my parents that I needed, was Ritalin, which is basically the precursor for Adderall, from what I understand. I don't know much about the drug now. I just know that it was designed to keep me calmer. And it's not the thing that I probably needed at the time. It was needed according to my parents and according to my teachers because they wanted to keep me calmed down. And I grew up in an era where we played outside and got plenty of sunlight and didn't eat nearly as much processed food as we do now, at least not when I was that age. This is another area where young people, especially young parents in this case, are being led down the wrong path by people who you're supposed to be able to trust, by doctors who you put your children's lives' hands in when you take them in there and you ask them what they need for this or that, or what their illnesses are, or what their problems are. And their solution invariably is some drug that is not the solution. The solution is getting rid of the poison that's in your life, getting out and getting natural sunlight, breathing clean air, exercising, doing things that people have done for thousands of years, up until we started putting ourselves in buildings where we're always covered all the time in artificial light. That's one of the things that makes it rough for me sometimes, is doing all these videos. I'm indoors a lot. I try to spend as much time outside every day as I can. And if I can get an hour in the sun, I'm real happy, especially if I can get my shirt off and really get some sun exposure so I can get some good vitamin D. We're just not taking advantage of these things today, and it's hurting us.
That's the standard of care, not even thinking about it. Think about any animal you put in a cage, low sunlight, sedentary,
They go crazy.
force feeding ultra-processed food. So
that's what we do to prisoners.
Just as a societal level here, we're really committing mass child abuse in many ways, and we're normalizing that, and we're not speaking out about that. And then we're giving people stimulants developed by Nazi Germany. I mean, it's kind of crazy. That's much more profitable. I mean, from a pure economic standpoint, getting a kid off of this treadmill costs millions of dollars. A diabetic person on Medicaid, if they're diabetic by the time they're 30, they're getting millions of dollars. They're generating millions of dollars paid for by the government to pharmaceutical and healthcare companies, millions of dollars. If you train a lower income person, and talk to them about metabolic health, frankly, reading the principles Casey talks about in the book, and they're going on a path of thriving, of understanding with their family what they're putting into their bodies, of movement. they're costing the system millions of dollars. That's how the kind of economic reality of how the system works on this. That's kind of the battle. Getting to your point about how people let this happen on doctors, I think the brilliance of the systemic design is the most revered people in our society are basically able to keep up this system. They're able to have their fancy studies that really just take responsibility for managing the diseases instead of curing, right? They censor. I had a call when I attacked the dean of Tufts Nutrition School, the most prominent nutrition researcher in the country, Dariush Mozaffarian. He called me and actually threatened to call Stanford, where we both went. And he said, we know the same people at Stanford. This is not right to be upsetting the apple cart. And I said, well, does your school not take the majority of its funding from food companies to impact nutrition policies in the United States? He said, of course we do, but that doesn't impact my judgment. And the fact that you're calling that out and the fact that you're questioning the study that we conducted with the NIH that said Lucky Charms were healthier than beef. The fact that you're calling this out really isn't polite. This isn't how it works, Calley. And we know the same people at Stanford, and this isn't polite. I'm going to call Stanford and basically threatening me to be kicked out of the club. That's how this works.
And then these studies are used to create, influence the USDA guidelines. 95% of people on the USDA nutrition guidelines for America 2020 to 2025 had a conflict of interest with food companies. These studies are used to influence what the USDA is basically saying can go in school lunches. The USDA controls the U.S. school lunch program, which serves 3 billion meals per year to students. It's the largest fast food chain in America is the USDA school lunch program. And, just this past year, Kraft Heinz is brokering deals with the USDA to put Lunchables in schools.
It's the top growth area for Kraft.
What's a Lunchable?
Many of you probably know what a Lunchable is, so we'll get into that in a second. But I think it's very interesting that this is the subtle things that go on in daily life for a lot of people who are basically told, don't rock the boat. Don't say anything that goes against what we're doing, what's regular, what's accepted, when you know that it's wrong. When you know that it's wrong and you don't say anything, you're allowing those things that they talked about, how those policies become institutionalized because nobody said, wait, this is not right. At the right levels, nobody said that. And that's what we need to turn this whole system around, is we need people who are willing to speak the truth. Jordan Peterson, who turned me on to a carnivore way of eating several years ago, and it's changed so many things for me, talks about some other things that I have found along the way that I already knew, but I just wasn't applying in my life because it was too easy to go along, to get along in so many cases. But when you start to realize that the only way that you live free in this world is to live by what you think, by what you actually believe, and stick to the truth as far as you know it. When you speak a lie, you're lying to yourself, and you do so much damage to your own soul when you speak lies that you know are lies. You've got to speak the truth if you want to have any notion of living free. That old saying in the Bible about the truth setting you free is absolutely the case. When you stop living a lie, when you stop accepting things that you know are not true, even those little small things that you do to get through your workplace, to be able to be a part of what your workplace does, you set yourself up for failure in life when you don't speak the truth. That truth will truly set you free, but it's not something that's popular. It's not like people like he's talking about that came after him, that Calley mentioned came after him. Those kind of people are going to be out there because they don't want you upsetting the apple cart. They want to make sure that everything keeps going nice and smooth because they're getting their bills paid by this. They're getting their prestige. They're getting their accolades from the places they work for or from institutions that recognize achievement in certain areas. But a lot of times those accolades and recognition are simply to keep the status quo where they want it and keep the lies going out and the money and power coming in.
It's the processed plastic squares with
ham,
crackers
cheese, and crackers. That's going to be the school lunches, and these corporate deals are happening. And it's studies like this that then
I'm assuming
allow
Lunchables are suboptimal.
They're suboptimal. You look at the ingredients. There's about 60 ingredients in these packages. There's no fruit. There's no vegetables. It's literally processed flour, processed sugar, processed oil. It's just these staples of the American ultra processed food system that are just rotting children's brains and bodies.
Would you believe, right, today, and I think this is one of the most criminal that we talk about weight we can change. Today, the USDA, which sets the standards that impact schools, that impact parents' perceptions, everything, they say that a healthy diet for a 2-year-old is up to 10% added sugar. They're recommending added sugar for 2-year-olds when we have a metabolic health crisis, a childhood obesity crisis, and where 33% of young adults now have prediabetes, which would have just been absolutely unthinkable. There's an assault on children's cells because of our food. Added sugar is a huge one. And the USDA recommends it. Imagine, and this is just, it's so simple. If medical leaders actually had courage, if we had the volume and the urgency of our medical community talking about the COVID vaccine, about the childhood chronic disease crisis, not banning sugar, not banning anything, but just from a medical perspective, saying it's probably a good idea to re-look at what we're feeding kids in the midst of a metabolic health crisis, and probably sugar should be discouraged. They don't say that right now. The USDA just put a report out saying a diet 93% in ultra-processed food for kids could be healthy. The USDA is doing marketing for ultra-processed food. They're not speaking in a clear voice because 95% of the advisors on the committee are corrupted. 40% of the advisors that President Biden has already put for the next committee are paid for by the maker of Ozempic. Why do we have a huge chunk of the USDA Nutrition Guideline Committee paid for by Ozempic? You'll have to unpack that one for me.
A foreign drug maker.
Yeah, and then you've got, Jason and Travis Calley doing brokering. You might have seen they're now endorsing a new cereal blend with General Mills, and every mainstream media outlet is with them basically laughing about how great this is. They're not talking about this metabolic disease epidemic that's destroying our children. They just turn a blind eye to any of the problematic nature of this because, of course, their ad funding comes from pharma and food.
Can I ask, so you all are focused on children, which is, indisputably the right thing. But for, people my age, maybe even your age, watching someone you love die from dementia, from Alzheimer's, universally regarded as the worst thing, just the worst thing. And it seems to me the incidence of dementia is like rising. Yeah. Am I imagining that? If it's
true, why is it happening? As the previous administrator at a retirement home, I can tell you that it definitely was on the rise. Even while the 10 years that I was at the retirement home, I saw it go from where we maybe had one person out of 24 that had dementia or some form of mild Alzheimer's, to where half of our residents had some form of dementia and more than 2 or 3 would have Alzheimer's. Some of them, it seemed like they were getting younger and younger too. We had one poor lady that was probably in her 50s and a couple of ladies that had it that were in their 50s. And it's such a devastating illness. But when somebody is still young and strong and their mind doesn't work and they don't know who their children are, they don't know how to go to the bathroom properly, it is so sad to witness. And we had no idea during the 10 years that I was there that Alzheimer's is what it is now known as, which is type 3 diabetes, because it's sugar related. Sugar plays a huge role in it. And so many people are addicted to sugar today like never before. And as early as World War II time period, we started to see major issues as a result of the influx of sugar. All of the stuff where Ansel Keys got off track on cholesterol has everything to do with sugar and nothing to do with red meat. And I talk about that in a lot of videos. And if you've ever known anybody with dementia or with Alzheimer's specifically, you know how devastating it can be. Cutting out the sugar can not only prevent Alzheimer's, but I just recently found out there have been some cases where cutting out the sugar has been able to reverse the effects of Alzheimer's. When I'm editing, sometimes it's really hard to have time to get up and make something to eat. That's why I love Carnivore crisps. I keep a bag handy just in case I get a little hungry so that I don't have to be distracted from my work. I can stop for a moment, have some delicious food that is perfectly on my way of eating, that has been so good for my body and so good for my mind. Beef brisket is my favorite by far of all the Carnivore crisps. Get yours at carnivorecrisps.com and use my coupon code Dante, D-A-N-T-E, to save 10% on your order. I hope you love them as much as I do.
true? Why is it happening? What can be done?
It's going up rapidly. It's happening in younger people. We're seeing Alzheimer's in people as young as 50. There are no drugs that actually reverse the disease. There are no good drugs for Alzheimer's. And we know... Still, there are no drugs there's drugs that slightly slow the progression, but do nothing to reverse the disease. And research from top journals in the world, like The Lancet, have explicitly stated that it is modifiable lifestyle factors that drive the development of this disease. Things like healthy eating, smoking, and moving and exercise. These are the best possible way we could prevent Alzheimer's in this country is by people getting up and moving more, eating unprocessed organic food, not smoking. And unfortunately, you never hear that, right? This is a largely preventable disease that is skyrocketing right now.
Alzheimer's is largely preventable.
Largely preventable.
Oh, yeah.
Alzheimer's with simple, free lifestyle habits. Right now, Alzheimer's dementia, many researchers are calling it type 3 diabetes. Okay, we have type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, type 3 diabetes, because there is such a link between metabolic dysfunction and the development of the disease. And you think about it, it makes complete obvious sense. The brain is 2% of our body weight, but it uses 20% of our energy because it's like a computer. It's high processing power, right? It's using tons of energy to make all these billions of neurons work, right? So 20% of our body's energy. Metabolic dysfunction is a problem with how our body makes energy because our cells are destroyed by our food and our environment. So you have a problem in the body systemically, like diabetes or prediabetes, that's an overt representation of our bodies not making energy properly. That is going to disproportionately affect the brain. Okay. So an underpowered brain is going to not be able to think properly. And that's what's happening in Alzheimer's. There's a neuroenergetic theory of Alzheimer's that creates the downstream issues that we talk about, like the plaques in the brain and things like that. These are responses to a fundamental issue with how the brain is powering itself. So we need to just all wake up and realize we need to support the cells of the body with the simple evidence-based habits that let us be metabolically healthy so our brain has the energy to do its work.
If dementia or Alzheimer, there are many forms of dementia, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, but if at least the big one is caused by metabolic dysfunction, is it conceivably reversible or slowable with changes to behavior?
There are amazing researchers like Dr. Dale Bredesen, Dr. David Perlmutter, many others who have shown that we can reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's with a healthier lifestyle. Dr. Dale Bredesen, who wrote The End of Alzheimer's, which everyone should read.
It's the most effective reversal protocol ever conducted.
What is it?
He talks about how there's not one thing here, right? It's a breaking of the cells, and that can happen from a lot of different things in our environment. So he talks about like 36 holes in the roof that basically have to be plugged for the rain to stop pouring into the house, right? So it's not just one thing. We've got to check our vitamin D levels. We've got to check our insulin levels. We've got to get our B12 levels right. There's all these things that we know affect the cellular biology of our brain. And essentially, when you overwhelm the body too much and undernourish it, there's going to be breakdown. And so we have to examine each of these factors that we know is linked to dementia and then fix each one. And the path for you might be different for me, right? Some of those 36 factors might be fine in you, but not fine in me. And we might have different ones. So that's why personalized medicine is so important, because we have to understand, it's from all aspects of our environment that our cells are getting hurt. So we have to realize through testing and personalized, medicine, which in our body are causing the problems. But by and large, the simple reality is if we're eating nutrient-rich whole foods, moving our bodies, getting enough sleep, staying intellectually stimulated, not smoking, and avoiding toxins, our cells are going to do a much better job at doing their work.
Very interesting, all of this about Dr. Dale Bredesen. I hadn't heard of it, so I went ahead and looked up his book. And I'll put a link in the description for that so that you guys can check out any of the books that are mentioned in here. For one, they're Amazon associate links, so they support the channel when you buy books through those links, but it also supports the authors who are working on this information because you're buying their book. So I always want to try to show as much support as I can, and I'm a voracious reader, and I encourage anybody to read as much as they can. And a lot of this stuff about food and diet and recent research, it's great stuff. If you want to really have a good foundation for how to keep moving forward with the right answers, I would encourage you to read these type of books. And if you know anybody with Alzheimer's, just from what little she's pointed out about this Dr. Bredesen, this End of Alzheimer's book is the first program to prevent and reverse cognitive decline, is going to be a must read. Carnivore and whole foods go hand in hand. Carnivore is a whole food type of eating because you're eating natural food. You're eating the food that humans ate for thousands of years. Meat has been a mainstay of our diet for thousands of years. For people who always talk about, well, so have vegetables and so have breads. Yes, they have been, but the vegetables that we have today have been altered to the point that they are no longer natural. Most vegetables you find today are nothing more than processed food. If you can raise your own vegetables from heirloom seeds without pesticides, without herbicides, without all of the stuff that they use today that comes from Merck and all these chemical companies, then maybe you'll have something that isn't going to harm you nearly as much as it would with the stuff that's on the shelf today. And then some of you are going to be as compromised as I was, that have leaky gut, that have Crohn's disease, that have other autoimmune disorders, to where even having a small amount of those vegetables or fruits and sugars and all the things that are in those things are going to have a negative effect on your health and prevent you from moving forward. And for those of you who find yourself in that position, carnivore is a wonderful option to consider. I personally do the lion diet, which is ruminant meat, water, and salt only. I've talked about that in the previous few videos, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on that, but it has done wonders for my health. It hasn't just helped me lose over 100 pounds since I first started this way of eating, but also it has gotten rid of all of the metabolic disorders that I had before, all of the medicines that I used to have to take for things like GERD and high blood pressure and a number of other issues, and the issues that they weren't even prescribing medicine for, like the gut problem that I had, where doctors were making me feel insane for even talking about the pain that it was causing me, because they couldn't find anything that they could treat. They couldn't find anything they could prescribe a medicine for to fix. So they had no diagnosis for me. In addition to that, my vision has improved, my brain fog is gone, my anxiety has gone down. It's just amazing what happens when you get all of this poison out of your body. It changes so much. And it's how we individually can get to the root cause of what's making us sick and fat and unhealthy, so that we have the strength and the energy to say what we need to say when these type of things are going on, that where we can take a stand for the things that are right, where we can teach our children how to make food that's going to keep them healthy and break free from this cycle of dependence that we have on government and big food and big pharma to provide everything for us that's just leading us down this deadly path.
Chapter of when we get into plans is really guiding Casey guides through a list of how to read blood tests. You know, I got on a path a couple of years ago when I had my regular cholesterol test. They said I was perfectly fine, showed it to her. She's like, this is blaring metabolic dysfunction. I go back to my doctor and they're like, oh yeah, it's really bad, but you're not treatable yet. You're not ready for a statin. So we just say you're fine. Like a key thing is actually
Seriously?
Yeah. So you get to treatable levels. And then when but we're brewing metabolic dysfunction. Everyone, especially people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are healthy are brewing metabolic dysfunction. They're brewing those things. But my mom was told she was healthy by her primary care provider months before the cancer diagnosis, because she was on 5 medications, which is less than the average American her age. Right? Well, these are all rites of passage, right? So I wasn't quite at the statin level. So a key thing, and we arm this with the book, just with the free blood tests, and then there's new services, this personalized medicine revolution where you can get 100 blood tests, companies like Function Health, or you can go to a functional medicine doctor who can order these tests. It's just a couple $100. And you can get more of a personalized view. And then you can attack those deficiencies with food and with supplementation and get the root cause of things under control. And to our point in the book is that dementia is on the same, it's a branch of the same tree as diabetes, as heart disease, as kidney disease, of even dying of COVID. These are all very similar things. If you can cure the root, if you can understand. So a lot of our advice would just be work through the personalized blood tests, understand what's happening to you, and then match those nutrient needs with your food and with your supplementation to cure what your blood tests are telling you. And if you get your metabolic biomarkers more under control, you're able to reverse and absolutely prevent most of the conditions that are plaguing the American people that have really only become new phenomenons in the past generation. It's all kind of rooted in the same thing. And that's really what our big mission is like we need actually a new paradigm of how we view chronic disease. I mean, it's actually just a lie that if you have a high cholesterol, high blood sugar, and depression, you're seeing 3 different doctors who aren't talking to each other at all. That's just wrong. It's very profitable, but it's wrong. You're on 3 different lifetime plans. You can really solve it with the root cause. And that's, if the medical system was sane, right, with lower costs and unleash human capital. We're debating on the margins right now on the left and the right about how to change page 300 of Medicare Part D. Unless we're attacked.
Okay. So we finished the section where they talk about dementia and birth control pill. The next section is going to be dealing with Obamacare. And that's only, these are titles that they came up with based on what was being said in the interview. It's not like they had a plan to talk about these specific things, but it's the way I have to break these videos up so that I can get it into bite-sized pieces that you can watch. And also, I've got to take a call here. Oh, look at that. It's ringing right now. That's okay. I'm going to call them back, but I've got to get on to that. Meanwhile, I'm going to put the book that they're talking about that they wrote that I can't remember the name of. I'll just put it right here so you can see it. And you can see any of the books that were mentioned today in the description of this video. So I encourage you, for your own knowledge and to support people who are speaking the truth, go ahead and check out these books today. That's all I got for this one, guys. I'll talk to you on the next one.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?